After victoriously coming back from fending off Muslim armies in Sicily, in Tuscany, a celebration to Christianity was held. A cathedral in Pisa was built. And after 110 years, on this day, 851 years ago, people kind of thought, you know what, this cathedral is kind of nice, but it lacks a campanile, a bell tower. It only took 199 years to finish, but in the end, we got what is known as today the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Now, we're staying close for today to Christianity and religion because we are talking about healers. After talking about tanks, it's now time to look at what's been changing in the war within for healers and try to answer the question, why would you want to play a certain healer? We're not talking about the simplest answer, which is I'm only playing what's OP. So we're not looking at a meta tier list of who is super strong right now. We are like 5 weeks away from the release of the actual season. Plenty of tuning will come from now to then. So for now, we are limiting ourselves to simply look at what is good or what is bad about each and every healer spec right now. We have also our list of tuning, our recent tuning, the one from a couple of weeks ago, the one from last week, and the one from the last couple of days with a few changes also about some of the healers. So we are beginning with Resto Druid. Why would you want to play Resto Druid? What is good and what is bad about Resto Druid? What is bad is the general hero talent tree is still quite terrible. After many different reworks to talent trees in the beta, Druid was kind of missed on. The general tree is still quite bad in the pathing. Blizzard is having trouble trying to mix 4 different specs, 2 casters and 2 melee specs together and make them be able to reach certain talents they might want to take. This hasn't really happened in the changes of the War Within. What is good, on the other hand, is your hero talents. You now have 2 serviceable hero talents. Keeper of the Grove for now is a bit more of a raid type of hero talent, whereas Wild Stalker, with its free damage and also free healing in the form of HOTS, is better overall in Mythic Plus, but at least you have 2 functioning ones, which is not something we can say about some of the other specs. You do have good burst healing cooldowns in the raid, not nearly as much in Mythic Plus. Some of your standard healing tools for the raid like Flourish and Trank are nowhere near as powerful in Mythic Plus. You are practically mostly locked with playing Incarn if you want really good burst in Mythic Plus, but in the raid they are definitely working. You know, in the raid, this, for example, you could mistake this for a Discipline Priest, right? It's a very similar playstyle in the raid. You blanket the raid with rejuice 10 to 15 seconds before the big damage, and then you Swiftman, your 3rd Swiftman that will put you into Tree of Life for free. After that, you use Wild Growth, you pop Flourish, maybe you pop 1, 2, 3 of your Grove Guardians, and this is what you get. The other positive is that not only can you still play like this in the raid, but now you can also play a much more straightforward, standard, high HPS without that much burst healing in the raid, which is always good for a healer. It's always good to have multiple options. This is mostly thanks to Blizzard severely buffing the base power of the healing of Druid, in particular the non-reju healing of Druid. Now you have Regrowth, which is now hitting for a lot. Now Regrowth is stronger than Reju, and if you take Abundance, your default very powerful tool for Regrowth, now Regrowth gets to be one of the stronger spot healing tools in the entire game when it comes to healers, which is very powerful both in Mythic Plus and in the raid. These are both very positives because one of the coolest things you can have when a new expansion comes is to have some extra different kind of playstyle, which Resto Druid is getting a little bit by having more value on their other abilities, in particular with Regrowth. Many of the other positives, if you might want to play Resto Druid, you have good amount of utility in Mythic Plus especially. You still have the raid buff in Mark of the Wild. You are reasonably tanky, more so than your DPS counterparts, especially than balance. What might be bad about Resto Druid is having to value a little bit some NPCs, some bots you get to help with, and not all of your power will come just from yourself, but from someone else, as well as the weaving of damage and healing. It's not as extreme as a fist weaving Mistweaver Monk, but to maximize Resto Druid, you do kind of want to get into your damaging abilities, even more so if you're playing Wild Stalker, if you're in Mythic Plus. That's going to be even more of a pseudo requirement if you want to maximize the power of your spec. The other positive, which is worth mentioning because some of the other healers will be quite weak on this, you are pretty strong in single target healing. You are still one of the strongest ones due to the power of your mastery. Simply stacking more hots on the same target will make you heal in single target more and more, as well as being one of the healers that has the options of externals, both major externals and minor ones to get extra healing in single target, which is still there in the War Within. Overall, it's a pretty positive situation for Resto Druid, and you would have more reasons to be wanting to play Resto Druid than not to in the next expansion. Now, talking about the next one being Preservation Evoker. So, Preservation Evoker does have, we mentioned, the serviceable, good-ish hero talents for Resto. Preservation has the best, period. They have the best hero talents in the game for healers. When it comes to the option, when it comes to the variety it gives you in how you want to play your build, you are the best. You have, the ability to play with Engulf, but you can still play with Blossom and Engulf. Maybe you can go back to playing Engulf while playing the typical Echo Spread, Dream Breath, Spirit Bloom, Verdant Embrace and Lifebind type of build, or you can completely ditch Engulf and Flame Shaper, go instead to Chronomancer and play around Lifebind and really big Lifebind healing with Dream Breath and with Spirit Bloom. That is what you get from these two hero talents. Very, very good. In terms of bad, there isn't actually much bad for Preservation Evoker. You haven't gotten much of any changes to your talents. This one, the tier set being put here as an extra option at the bottom, is very good for Mythic Plus. It helps you to get more free damage and even free better spot healing. In Mythic Plus, you have stolen Spatial Paradox from Augmentation. That's also very good for the raid. This is a very good tool for healers in the raid. But besides this, most of the other stuff is quite the same for you as a healer. You still have amongst the, if not the best raid healing when it comes to flat out, massive raid wide HPS being required. Preservation is very powerful. They have arguably the strongest amount of cooldowns they can line up, whether it is Rewind, whether it is an Emerald Communion ramp, or simply having Stasis ready. You were already powerful. Now, if you're playing Flame Shaper and you add to all of this, you add Consume Flame and the Explosion healing, you have practically the best burst healing out of any other healer. Your weakness, you're still kind of whack in single target healing. Unlike Resto Druid, which we just mentioned, you would have to go Chrono Warden and get more value of your Living Flame power, plus play with Life Spark and buff your Living Flames even more to have an even somewhat decent single target healing. But your power is definitely in group play. You're a much stronger group play kind of healer. You remain pretty tanky. You now even have, with Chrono Warden, even extra options to be even tankier with Temporality, giving you the 20% DR after every hover, plus your usual utility in Mythic Plus that is still there. So the absolute most positive for Preservation is definitely the variety of options in builds and between the hero talents right now, which is a pretty good plus if you want to always be, fresh and try something new within your same spec. Preservation right now is looking quite good. Now, Mistweaver Monk does also have a decent amount of variety if you want to switch between the usual fist weaving type of build and the more traditional, raid healing type of build. It's two builds though. It's not nearly as varied as a Preservation Evoker, but it does offer a good amount of variety. Not really as much in the hero talents. Right now, Conduit of the Celestials is edging out Master of Armory by quite a bit more. Your extra 90-second cooldown in Celestial Conduit is proving to be very useful for a Mistweaver Monk who is not traditionally very powerful when it comes to cooldowns. Their revival is quite a joke. They are mostly just limiting down their cooldowns to be way more often available rather than being very strong on a very long cooldown. Practically now, you always play with Yulon on just a 1 minute cooldown. One of the pro and con of Mistweaver is practically one and the same, which is melee. You might enjoy playing a melee healer and you might hate it. You have the benefits of being in melee by avoiding many of the ranged mechanics, but you have to get used to playing in melee as a healer, which is not very usual for many healer players. You are, to combat being a melee healer, highly mobile amongst the, if not, definitely the most mobile out of all of the healers. So that will definitely help you a lot with moving around in melee. You're also very tanky as a healer between Fortifying Brew, your Diffuse Magic, some of the extra powers in your hero talent. You don't have nearly as many troubles staying alive as some other healers. And you do have the option, again, this could be both a pro and a con, of being able to play in melee, being able to do melee damage, use certain tools to do extra damage, and healing with your melee damaging abilities. It's not necessary in the raid because most of the raid build will be your caster build, but it is something you can do already in the raid and is also the default main option when it comes to Mythic Plus. Overall, Mistweaver has been the least changed when it comes to healers. In terms of new things they have gotten, besides the extra cooldown you can get with Conduit of the Celestials, not really much else you are getting as a spec to play around with when it comes to your talents and your options for builds. It's still the typical, caster build or Fistweaver build with Rising Sun Kick and a more melee damage centric style. So practically, if you enjoyed Mistweaver in Dragonflight, you are pretty much guaranteed to be enjoying Mistweaver in the War Within, and same for the opposite. If you didn't enjoy Mistweaver before, not really much is changing to make you enjoy Mistweaver Monk. After them, we have the most nerfed spec in the beta, fresh, very recent, of a bunch of nerfs in the beta of a couple of days ago. Now, none of these nerfs though change how you play, change your playstyle and your build, so not really relevant right now. You have the strongest spot healing out of any healer. Some healers can beat you in how much they can spam their heal, like for example Resto Druid and Regrowth can do more than you. Other healers can beat you in a single spot heal every once in a while. Holy Priest has a very good thick spot healing, but you as a whole, between Holy Shock and Eternal Flame, are definitely the overall stronger healer when it comes to spot healing. You are still pretty tanky as a healer, unlike Mistweaver, who is tanky and also has the best mobility out of all healers. You arguably have one of the weakest mobilities out of all of the healers, only being relegated to using your little pony to move around. That's pretty weak as a healer, not really changing in the War Within. If you don't like it, you might not enjoy the combo playstyle of a healer, practically the only healer with a real builder spender type of combo. Preservation Evoker kind of gets close, but this one is much more limited in your playstyle. Most of the Holy Paladin playstyle will really just rely around spam Holy Shock. If you don't have Holy Shock to spam, maybe use Crusader Strike and then just dump your Holy Power in your Word of Glory or Eternal Flame. You don't have a very varied type of build. We mentioned, Resto Druid kind of gained regrowth and a more consistent type of healing, which differed from their usual playstyle. We then mentioned Preservation Evoker having the biggest amount of builds, and then Mistweaver mentioning they have only 2 builds, but they are pretty well defined and do pretty different things with their playstyle. You don't. You just have one playstyle. Your playstyle is to click Holy Shock. Then what you do after Holy Shock is kind of irrelevant. If you want to use Holy Shock and Light of Dawn, Holy Shock and Eternal Flame, whatever. Your playstyle is quite stale as a Holy Paladin. Despite the cries of many of the Holy Paladin players, you have been improved massively. Tons of your passive invisible power has been removed. The passive extra healing of your beacon has been nerfed. The passive extra healing of Glimmer has been removed. The passive extra damage of Blessing of Summer has been nerfed by over 50%. The passive extra healing increase on your spenders, like the extra healing from Blessing of Dawn, went from 20% per stack to 5% per stack, and a massive amount of your power has now been shifted into your base abilities. Holy Shock at the beginning of Dragonflight was around 155% spell power healing. Now it has gone up to 226% spell power, which is basically a 50% stronger Holy Shock, plus even stronger thanks to now the reworked Light of the Martyr, making it heal for even more. So it is overall a net positive for Holy Paladin, the changes you got from the War Within beta. One of the negatives could be your hero talents. Right now you are very stuck to Herald of the Sun because of how powerful it is. You aren't getting many chances of playing with Lightsmith, which not only is a buff oriented type of hero talent, which is not always the kind of things player want, you know, giving power away to others rather than buffing yourself. So this was already not a fan favorite, and on top of that it's been quite weaker than Herald of the Sun for the entirety of the beta. So right now your variety of options in hero talents isn't even that large. You have also gotten a pretty good bump in your playstyle because now your wings are significantly stronger. As a Holy Paladin, you didn't used to have super strong cooldowns. You had a multitude of smaller cooldowns like your Hand of Divinity, your Holy Prism, your Tears Deliverance, your Divine Toll. But now that your wings have been buffed, your Herald of the Sun significantly buffs your wings as well. Now you are even chunkier in terms of power when it comes to your cooldowns as a Holy Paladin. Now moving on to something way less positive and happy, which is Discipline. Now, why would you play Discipline? Well, the best answer to this would be because you have two specs to choose from. Because unlike other healers who might play a very weak or bad spec, they might have to reroll completely. You don't. As a priest, at least you have two options. One of the huge negatives and bigger barrier of entries when it comes to Discipline for many players is the fact that they have to do damage to heal. So for many players, this is a turn-off when it comes to healing. On top of that, their healing playstyle is very unique. They don't actually basically heal outside of their cooldowns, which means you have to put extreme care in how you actually pull off these cooldowns. So the ramp, the 12 to 13 seconds long ramp of precise clicks of specific abilities, you have to pull off as Discipline. So it's definitely not an entry-level kind of healer. You have gotten some decent additions in your hero talents, specifically the general tree, like getting the freebie extra point here of Surge of Light being 1 point only, but your spec tree is still bad. You have too many dead talents you don't want to take and you don't need, or you don't have enough talent points to take, which makes your build very narrow. Not like Preservation Evoker, like we mentioned, not even like the double build of a Mistweaver. You are way more strict in your options, even stricter than a Holy Paladin when it comes to what you can go for in your builds. And it hasn't really changed in the War Within. In fact, it's getting perhaps even stricter because the more powerful hero talent for now is Void Weaver. And that's what you have been seeing 99% of Discipline Priest players play in the beta. Nobody is playing Oracle because Oracle is way too weak. It has been Giga Ultra buffed multiple times in multiple talent options, in particular preventive measures. It might get to the point where it makes it way more playable than Void Weaver, but for now you are very stuck on a single playstyle as a Discipline Priest. You are still also one of the more immobile specs when it comes to healing together with Holy Paladin, except you're also squishier than a Holy Paladin. You would have to use your own external on yourself to get any semblance of tankiness, otherwise you're reasonably squishy. And the other biggest problem of Discipline is how much you need to plant. Plant meaning how much you cannot move, because as we mentioned, because of how important your ramp is, you practically can't move here because you need to be healing. You need to be casting double Radiance, and then you need to be casting Mind Blast, and then you need to be casting Halo, and all of this requires you to stand still to cast, which makes it a big weakness, especially in the raid. So overall, not too many positive things to mention about Discipline. There is still time to improve from Blizzard in the current state of the spec. Not even talking about the actual healing they have been doing, just about how the spec is playing, the options they have in the hero talents and in their builds. Not looking too good right now. Now, who is looking better is Holy Priest. Now, most of the issues or the good things in the general tree are the same, of course, of Discipline Priest. You also have somewhat of a similar problem to the hero talent, because again, you have Oracle and a much stronger hero talent in Archon. That's kind of the same problem Discipline Priest is in right now. But as a spec, you do flow much better. You haven't actually gotten many changes in the beta. You still have a lot of cooldown tracking to do as your main role as a healer. You have to track the cooldown of Circle of Healing, the cooldown of Prayer of Mending, the cooldown of Sanctify, the cooldown of Holy War Serenity, and also play around trying to reduce their cooldown, even the cooldown of the Empowered Holy Nova, plus the cooldown of some of your very important buffs to use with these abilities, like the cooldown of Healing Chorus, for example. But when you get going, it flows quite well. It's a pretty satisfying spec to pull off. It was in Dragonflight, and it continues to be in the War Within. Blizzard is trying to shift a bit more power away from this powerful talent so that now you can get to actually play more with Prayer of Healing, which is also now buffed significantly by your tier set. So you now might go back to a build where Circle is used mostly to just buff Prayer of Healing, to then spam it to get more renew casts. That might be an option in your build. You still have pretty powerful end talents that might be used at any time. You know, we might move away if Healing Chorus gets removed. We might move away from Pontifex and from Resonant Words. You might go back playing with Answered Prayers for Apotheosis, or if Prayer of Mending is more valuable, playing with Epiphany instead. Your hero talent is quite invisible, in the sense that the power of the hero talent is massive, right? But you don't actually have to min-max it that much. You just pop it, you gain all of the benefits, the extra healing buffs you gain from Resonant Energy, the free Surge of Lights, and the extra healing from Surge of Light is there. So it's quite in the background. You don't actually have to interact with this hero talent that much, as opposed to the, you know, massive interacting you have to do with things like Flame Shaper for Evoker. For a priest is a bit more standard, which is understandable, considering that we mentioned Discipline being perhaps not quite a new player friendly kind of healer. You kind of have the opposite with Holy. Holy is the new player friendly type of healer. As long as you can manage the reasonable amount of cooldowns you have to keep track of, Holy Priest is quite the standard, easy to pick up kind of healer. Now, after Priest and for last, we have Restoration Shaman, which has been receiving the, well, larger amount of changes in the beta due to the rework they have been receiving. So, talking about the rework, positive number one, they have gotten significantly tankier thanks to Stone Bulwark Totem. You also have a few other small extra possible tanky tools that you might make use of, but in general the bigger one is the introduction of Stone Bulwark's Totem to make you have an extra cooldown for your defensive power. You do have very powerful hero talents. Blizzard started out with Farseer being practically broken and unusable, but after multiple sets of buffs now Farseer is a legitimate option, especially in Mythic Plus, where you might not want to play as much with Chain Heal and much more power in, you know, instacast, spot healing tools, meaning Riptide, so this one works pretty well in making your Riptide stronger. And then you have the raid healing, chain heal, focus, totemic, which is also very good. Your split is very similar to the one of Resto Druid in the different power of your hero talents. One more raid focused, the other one more Mythic Plus focused. You are still retaining your tons of utility, which gets even larger now, because now you also get access to a single target stun. So if the AoE knockup on a 25-second cooldown plus a 30-second cooldown stun plus the best interrupt in the game weren't enough, now you also have a single target stun. And then now you also have a raid buff in the form of Sky Fury. These are all very big positives for Resto Shaman. The other big positive that we mentioned is the playstyle. We, in this establishment, put a lot of value in being able to play multiple builds. So unlike something like we mentioned, Holy Paladin, as a Resto Shaman, you can play way more with Chain Heal in a certain build or way more with Riptide in a different build, as well as the differences you can have playing in Mythic Plus. If you don't want to play in Mythic Plus with Chain Heal, then you can just ditch a bunch of talents you don't want to use, pick more Mythic Plus focused talents, get rid of the ones you don't need in the raid or for Chain Heal, and instead go for more Mythic Plus centric type of talents, which is good. You know, it's good to give you more variety as a healer. You also have some extra buffs, extra very powerful tools in Mythic Plus, like for example being able now to gain much more easily Ancestral Vigor to give your players 10% max HP, and now also Downpour for more 10% max HP is going to be a very powerful tool in Mythic Plus as one of your options in your builds. So these are still very good positives for Resto. The negatives are perhaps a bit more similar to Preservation Evoker in the sense that you might suffer more if your group is not stacked, because because of Chain Heal, because of Healing Rain, but even things like Spirit Link Totem or APT or Earthen Wall Totem. Being able to stay stacked, you gain a bunch more value compared to other healers. And the last of the benefits and the negatives is that you do have the strongest healing cooldowns in the raid, even after the ultra buffed Spirit Link now being even stronger, a 15% DR on top of all of that it does, even after the nerfs given to Ancestral Guidance. Pairing it together with Ascendance is still very powerful, plus you have Healing Tide Totem, plus eventually Blizzard will manage to make Cloudburst Totem actually work, since it still isn't. The weakness though, you must have a weakness, your externals for the tank, your single target externals are non-existent. At least even the weak single target healing Preservation Evoker does have the option of going for time dilation. You kind of don't even have that. You have to waste or burn one of your actual big cooldowns if you want to give some help to the tank. And this is not really getting any better even in the War Within, and even after the hero talents being added, the problem is still kind of there for rest of Shaman. So overall, after going through all of the changes of the healers and even the recent tuning given to specs and perhaps some changes in playstyle and the pros and the cons of how they might play even after we get access to the hero talents at this point in just a couple of weeks. This one is the current situation when it comes to healers. So eventually, perhaps in a couple of weeks, we will start actually trying to put them down in a list for a meta and how they look when it comes to the actual power in the season. But for now, this was just in case you were wondering what to play on, what was good or what was bad about each and every healer before even having to look about their actual power. Because things might change. We might be praising Preservation Evoker for having 50 different builds and dunking on Holy Paladin for having a boring single build they play every time, but maybe Holy Paladin is SSS tier and Preservation Evoker is on the bench, right? That could happen. So for today, on this, I believe, Friday, it is now time to leave each other. We're starting the goodbyes, of course, by thanking everyone for having watched the video, as well as for supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, it's now time to leave each other. Thank you guys again for watching, see you guys tomorrow, and my throat is parched. I should have paused the video 20 minutes ago to go and drink something.